Bit of a technical difficulty. I guess that happens when you have two streams, one after the other, with people that have the same name. So sorry about that. Real quickly here, because we've lost a lot of time due to my stupidity. Let's get through all of this house cleaning stuff, and then we'll housekeeping stuff, and we'll be bringing everybody in, and we'll take this running. First of all, we got 359 of you here right now. Thank you so much for joining. I'm expecting this to be a really big stream. And so while you're here, please do me the favor of hitting that like button and the subscribe button. If you haven't subscribed, I hope by the end of this, you'll have it in your heart to subscribe to the channel and help the channel grow as we progress slowly towards 50,000. And then make sure you take and if you have already subscribed, please just double check and make sure you're still subscribed. I'm getting the emails again. It happens about every week. At least once a week, I get emails from people telling me that they've been unsubscribed. So please double check to make sure you still are. And we have our daily like and subscribe poll over here. I want to kind of keep it a little bit serious today. So we're just kind of going to the basic poll. Have you done me the honor of hitting the like and subscribe button? Yes, of course. And oops, just did now. Sorry for the lameness of all of that, but you know, little bit of a serious issue here today. And that is what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be bringing up people, Aussie Overlaw'd Hayden. Hayden has been here from day one. We co-streamed the trial, me in the morning and him in the afternoon. And we also have Solomon Anderson. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
And Chandler, she'll be joining us. Chandler Remington will be joining us as soon as she is able. Hopefully she's not over on the now defunct Zenith stream where I was. All right. So sorry about the delay. Like I said, I screwed up by streaming on the wrong place to begin with. And then we were also talking a little bit behind the scenes about what's going to be talked about and what's not going to be talked about. I said some basic ground rules for what can and cannot be discussed. And generally we'll talk about that here in a second, but just wanted you all to know that I will be talking to Zach's sister, Zenith, who I see is here in chat tomorrow. And the reason for doing that, like I've told everybody and them, I think this situation affects a brother differently than it would affect a sister. And I wanted to get both perspectives separately and independent of each other. So that's why we decided to do this over 2 days instead of having both people here on one day. But now we're all here together, so that's a good thing. So to begin with, I guess before we get anywhere, Solomon, why don't you give us like a brief overview of what you are allowed to say and what you're not allowed to talk about, so that the chat can know right from the beginning where we're going with this.
All right, everybody. So everybody knows I can't talk about anything that has to do with the case that wasn't discussed in court, especially things that are not my personal experience. I can't talk about anything that'll jeopardize the appeals, specifically things like that are relevant to those topics. I can't touch, and they have to remain sacred.
And other than that, it's pretty much open. And where I want to go with this, I want to get a bit of a background on what's going on, what it was like growing up together, what kind of a person Zach was, and how this has changed him and changed you and changed the family dynamic, what's going on now and what's going on in the future. That's kind of how I want to progress through this. And we're going to have a discussion here, guys. It's not going to be an interrogation or even an interview. I just want to talk freely and get to know people, because I don't know, this trial kind of affected me differently. I mean, we came into this right on the heels of the Alex Murdaugh trial, which had a stunning lack of evidence, which resulted in a financial crimes trial, therefore a guilty of double murder verdict somehow. That was hard to understand. I didn't get that. And then we jumped straight into this, where it's not really an extreme lack of evidence. It's an utter lack of evidence. And as I've been upfront with both Zenith and Solomon, is I don't know whether he did it or not. I do not know whether Zachariah Anderson did this or did not do this. There is one or possibly two people that know, and that would be him and whoever did or did not do it. Those would be the only two people that can say for sure. But what I do know, and I've never, ever been shy about saying this is I don't think they came even anywhere remotely close to discharging their burden of proof. So
No, absolutely not.
whether he did it or didn't do it, he should be out on the streets right now, just because utter lack of evidence.
I think that you forgot Mr. Gutierrez, because if he is still around because they haven't found him, then he would know.
Okay, there may be 3 people. That's right, and that's what. And we'll talk a little bit about this too. And that's one thing that Hayden and I were both saying from the beginning. Assuming he's dead, which we can't say. I mean,
I still think he's sitting on a beach somewhere trying to earn 20%.
What was your big overview on that? That was sort of where I was coming into this trial from. What about you, Hayden? I mean, how was your approach different than mine, if it was?
I don't think there was much at all, because what I did was the same as what I think a lot of people did, was without knowing too much about the case, I came into it as a blank slate, the same way that I try and approach every trial that we watch. And I try not to do too much in terms of background research, anything like that, because I try and maintain the view of what I would expect to be what I'll call a professional juror, someone that has a background in the law, but that is hearing specifically everything that is in the case for the first time and forming my basis off of that. That's how I try and approach each and every trial that I watch. And I do think that they didn't prove shit, and there were some very slimy tactics here, and I was not impressed by the way that the DA handled themselves in this. So, but that's pretty much how I approach everything.
Well, I guess let's go back in time. Take us back to the beginning. First, introduce yourself. I guess that would be the proper place to start for those of you that don't know. And I said, this is the first time that I've ever had anyone directly involved in a case in my stream. And of course, Zenith was the first one that I know. And she's like, I'm the sister. I'm like, yeah, right. So I had to do the due diligence, and then it was you and your wife, girlfriend.
Yeah, my future wife. Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah.
She's in the chat now. I think that's our.
Yeah. So I just wasn't exactly clear on that. So the relationship, but so all 3 of you were here, and I did my due diligence through her and realized, holy crap, this actually are the people that are involved. And that kind of struck me different because it's never happened before. And I told Zenith, which we'll talk about tomorrow, I said, this may not be the stream for you because I'm going to call it as I see it. And I did. I think just how I saw it, which is definitely in favor of Zach in this. But this trial kind of affected me differently in that way, that I cared more than I should normally care about a verdict because it was so, in my opinion, unjust and unfair. I want to know how we get there.
But trust me, we felt the exact same way. I mean, we felt this way almost 3 years ago after his arrest, trying to figure out like where to connect the dots, how this all adds up. Really just the logical connection. And then, as a family, just like having that question, like, well, am I biased? Am I thinking about this the wrong way? Like what actually did they find? And then going back through the evidence and really looking at it critically, as critically as possible, because, as it turns out, I love my brother. There was a moment that he and I were having a bonfire at his house, and we were laughing so hard, and we were just crying. And I looked at him, and I just told him, like, I'm going to remember you in this moment for the rest of my life. Just because of the joy, that genuine smile, like who he is as a person.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you want us to know about you personally?
Well, my name is Solomon. I'm Zach's brother. I work in healthcare. I'm in nursing school right now. I actually met Jen. I walked away from a career in construction. I had my own business doing construction remodeling. Zach and I worked in tandem together, actually. He invested in like Sheriff's Hill properties. We would fix them up and rent them out, trying to build, real estate and a secondary income and things like that. And I had other jobs that I did, with clients, and I worked all the time. But I walked away from that after Zach's arrest and during the pandemic to then be with my future wife and start a family. She's actually about 4 weeks away from having our first child together. So,
Oh
Oh,
wow!
congratulations.
Yeah,
yeah,
congratulations.
so
Cool.
it's a very busy time. I'm in school. I'm still a dad. You know, we've got a baby on the way. I'm trying to pilot this campaign to raise awareness for one, my brother's innocence, and two, for the concept of reasonable doubt and the ideal that someone is innocent until the state proves beyond reasonable doubt that they are guilty. And it's an important precedence for us as Americans. You know, it's one of the pillars that our justice system is constructed around, and I don't see how that is being executed in the law as it stands today. It's really trial by mob, and that's a travesty for all of us as a people.
Yeah, and we definitely want to get into that. That's kind of why I'm here doing this YouTube stuff. Is exactly that reason. You just how it's and it was the this other trial that we started and kind of abandoned after a few days, where the defense lawyer said something that really struck me in his opening. He said it's not guilty. It's not guilty until proven. He said it's innocent unless proven.
Right.
And I thought that sort of struck home. I mean, really, really well. It's not even until, it's unless, and I don't think there was any unless in this. Well, let's take us back to your childhood. I mean, what was it like growing up? What kind of things were you two guys doing? Was it typical brother stuff, or?
I mean, childhood mischief. Our mother left in 1989 and left us to our father. She basically put us on the phone in turn with our dad, and then had us wait outside in the driveway, and for my dad to pick us up. So my brothers and I kind of trauma bonded. My eldest brother Josh, Zach, and I, you know, we bonded together through some experience that other families don't necessarily have. My dad was married at the time, but shortly thereafter was no longer married, and we were raised effectively through those like key developmental years by a single father, and he did his best to keep us afloat and be there for us. But there's only so much that one man can do for three growing boys. So we kind of had the parallel to Alvin and the Chipmunks or Huey, Dewey, and Louie, as the cartoon characters, out of the late 80s and early 90s, as three brothers. And it was it didn't come without challenges. We weren't well off. We worked really hard to try and build ourselves up and work together. I mean, I think I had told a story previously about how when I was 17 years old, my brother Zach had very specifically, not only had he gotten me my temps to make sure that I got my license. My dad wasn't available to help me do that, but he also challenged me after helping me get my first job to then start saving money. So he and I would try and save as much of our money as possible, so I wasn't blowing my money on my paycheck like most kids at that age. And really forward thinking. Zach always put me or me and my brother Josh before his own needs, and he very, very much was self-sacrificing that way. I mean, people made some comments about him living in squalor, and the reality is we got to the house because there was a fire hazard, and we went to fix the electrical that was a problem. But instead of putting the walls back together, he said, there's not enough return on the investment. What I would rather do is wait and continue to take the money that I have and invest it in future income possibility, because we grew up poor. And that was an important aspect of how he thought and how we operated as a unit together. It was not necessarily about living in comfort or living well with the money that he had. It was very specifically about how to project the whole family in a more positive direction. And Zach would live on spinach, mixed vegetables, and boiled chicken because he just was willing to live with less than other people.
Mhm.
Not that he didn't want more, but because he knew that that would help everyone else out if he could do that.
And what was your relationship growing up? And was it close all the time, or was the typical brother thing where you get picked on for a while, then you all grow up, or
No, we fist fought. We were brothers. Yeah, we were brothers, and like brothers that grow up very close. You know, you get emotionally charged. You argue about things. You know, we're periodically at odds about different topics and different issues. You know, and whether or not he had said something disrespectful to my eldest son's mother, or whatever it might have been in our history. We've exchanged words and as you could say, fisticuffs. But brothers do that. That's trial by blood. That you kind of work through it.
Mm-hmm.
And jump in anytime, Hayden. don't just feel free. Leap in.
You know what I'm like this time of the night. I mean, we saw so much happen in this trial that, as a lawyer myself, I saw comments in chat about people throwing the Xbox controllers against the wall and that sort of thing. Were there moments in court, do you think, where you had difficulty controlling yourself as well, or like how did this pan out for you from the moment that you had to sit in that gallery? Because there were times when we saw you in the background, sort of thing. What was going through your mind, do you think, when they were having to put him up there? And I mean, did you expect him to testify as well, I suppose, or is that something you can't talk about? What?
I don't know that I can get into a lot of the gritty about why he did or did not testify. I wasn't sure if he would. He knowing him, he might have pushed for it because he really wanted to tell his story. He wanted the truth out there in the world, and I think his lawyers had some prudent reasons to not do it. But I can't go into those. But
yep.
Not
asking for that. I was more interested in your opinion of how you thought it would have gone if he had have.
I think that watching him sit there, it was wonderful to see him in person. Like to actually see my brother face to face again after effectively 3 years through COVID. Like they didn't even have visitation. I could video chat a little bit, but they also kept us. Yeah. They kept us apart. They had a gag order on us for 2 years, so until the first mistrial, we couldn't even talk to him at all. They were trying to make sure they waited him out to try and break him into confessing. They stripped him of being able to talk to his, to Josh and me, his two closest brothers, to make sure that he didn't have any confidant there, anyone that he would be able to talk to and vent to and have that connection with. And that is just a dirty tactic on the court's behalf, and they made some excuses about it, but it was totally unjustified.
Yeah, there's a lot of shady shit that went on. During the trial and the previous trial, and again, what you're explaining now is just utterly ridiculous.
But I mean, that's the kind of the status quo in the American justice system is hold a person under duress, and hopefully they'll falsely implicate themselves in a crime. So the whole thing was disgusting. Detective Anschutz, I was not a fan of Detective Anschutz. Lauren Anschutz was the guy that waited multiple months to even have a conversation with me, and didn't have any interest in talking to me about anything other than confirming or denying anything that might have been said in his interview with my brother. Never went into anything else that I might have known about this alleged stalking situation. Never questioned me on anything that might have had to do with it. The dumpster that they talk about on my brother's property belonged to me. I paid for that dumpster. It was my dumpster. So I intimately knew what was in the dumpster, because I threw most of it in there, and I shoveled it all back up after they dumped part of it on the driveway. So, like they made some claims about things that just weren't I wasn't there to watch them search the dumpster, but they definitely didn't clear the whole thing. So there was just some stuff that guy said and his approach, that when I interviewed with him, I told him explicitly, that you have the wrong man. And I hope to God, for the sake of Mr. Gutierrez's family, that you're looking at every other possible lead, because you've wasted your time with my brother.
Was there any time during this that you had to do some soul searching and deep questioning to come to the decision that he didn't do it? Did you ever doubt him at any point during this?
There was zero question in my mind that he was innocent of the murder charge. There was no rationale or reason that a man that was cleaning his home and finally spending the money to fix it up, to make sure that it was safe for his children, would go out of his way to commit a crime like this when he had family court coming up and he was trying to get custody of his kids at least 50%, and he was trying to make his home and his life as child friendly and approachable as possible. It was part of the whole debate. He recognized that Sadie's home wasn't the best place for the kids. It was not, as you said, I think, in squalor. It wasn't a demolished home, but psychologically, emotionally, he wanted to have time to try and give the kids a safe space. And so his goal, his whole passion in that time frame that they brought this up, was very specifically looking out for his children's well-being. And the fact that they even presented that he had committed this crime, there was no logical connection between the two at all. I understood why he would CCAP the guy, look into his criminal history, and do things like that. I think any responsible parent going through a custody battle would be interested in the legal implications of the legal history of someone that their ex-partner is bringing into their children's lives. And going into the custody battle, it's relevant in court in representing her judgment in something like this. So, I empathize with where he was at and pursuing that information, and why he would have folders organized even for family court. That all makes sense. There's a logical path for that. As far as the stalking charge, he and Sadie were spending weeks before this arrest together for other reasons that I don't think that he would want me to go into. Yeah. But there was very specific reasons that they were spending literal weeks together. I think I mentioned on the previous podcast, I think it was May 2nd, she showed up to my little sister's birthday party and hung out with us. They left together, right? There was no question. They spent time together, quite a bit of it during this time period. And the fact that she claimed that she was in mortal fear for herself was never presented to us. It didn't make sense.
Well, I think there was the evidence that contradicted that. When she was talking to Gutierrez, saying, "Well, I'm not afraid of," something paraphrasing, "I'm not afraid of him. I'm just pissed he touched your stuff."
Right. Yeah. The fact that they have
those words.
They had evidence that they presented to the court that specifically cited that both she and Mr. Gutierrez, both of them, had cited that they were not afraid of him. Right. Very, very specifically, I'm not afraid. I'm not worried. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That didn't check out for me.
This is something you may tell me to back off immediately with, but how are the kids in this? Do you have any contact with them now, or?
I see them usually around Christmas, which after this trial, I don't know how liberal she'll be with the kids' time. She got 100% custody as soon as he was arrested, effectively. Yeah. She didn't have grounds to file a restraining order until after he was arrested, when they finally granted it, and then went to family court, which they didn't, Kenosha refused to let him attend at all. So she got 100% custodial rights of the children, including physical placement and legal rights. So there was, what I saw in a lot of the chats, a lot of people blaming my brother for my niece being on the stand. He couldn't do anything about it. He filed a motion to prevent it, actually. at this point, there's been unspeakable damage, right? Things that I can't talk about as far as the damage to especially my niece's psyche. And I think there's been some comments about the trauma of the situation and whether or not, she'll be able to recover at any given point. But the twins were like 4, so they at least might grow up and not be completely shattered, but they'll figure it out at some point. This is all on the internet forever. They're going to be able to see it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it just personally, I think it was kind of a slimy thing to do, to put his daughter on the stand for any reason whatsoever. I mean, 100%. It just offends me at every level.
So there was a rumor that one of the DAs, I think the one that's now a judge, and this is hearsay on my part, but they had said specifically that they thought they should move forward with prosecuting this case because they had an easily manipulatable minor witness.
Damn.
Well, that doesn't help me. That doesn't help my feeling any. It's not surprising.
From our perspective as a family, we hear these things, right? And of course, as a family, then it puts a lens on this whole case for us. And if you saw me laughing, when I was kind of laughing in the background behind Zach in the trial, it was my birthday, and my dad and I were just talking about what was happening in the courtroom. So some of my chuckles were due to that, and the other part was, just sort of like disbelief and disgust with the system as a whole, with Gravely as a DA, with how they treated our family and how they demonized my brother immediately as soon as he was arrested. On what evidence? I mean, we were trying to figure that out from the start.
And I mean, one of the things that stuck out, went wildly viral in media and the internet and everywhere else, was when his daughter was on, and I've got about 5,000 things going through my head right now, and none of them are good. The idea that we were supposed to be protecting her identity, but the DA kept dropping her name every 5 minutes.
Yep.
That pissed me off quite badly. But also on the stand, when she's giving her testimony, she's getting a little bit sassy with everybody. She dropped the F-bomb on the judge, and that was right around the time that all of this, who was saying what, was, she was getting signals from dad was giving her signals, mom was supposedly saying something, she's looking at mom, so everybody. And here's what I saw, even from Sadie and Zach's point of view. As a parent, she said that if I was signing to her, I was signing to be calm, which is exactly the same thing, the way I took it, as Zach going, come on, zip it, girl, not don't testify about this, but keep it in check. That's what I saw. I don't, what are your thoughts on that moment, if you can talk about that?
Well, there was very obvious moments where she was trying to communicate to Zach. In her defense, she hadn't seen him in 33 months. Not a single
Oh God, that was the first time So her on the stand was the first time she'd seen her father in over 2 years.
Wow.
Jesus.
Just under 3 years. Yeah. So the very
there you go.
Seen him, and it was, of course, a very emotional moment for her, and created some issues. Like, she couldn't help herself, clearly trying to communicate with him in some way, and in between questions from the lawyers, she would sort of lean over a little bit, and she would mouth questions or statements directed at him. So none of the cameras could legally be focused on her at all, so nobody else except for the people in the gallery got to see this, and the lawyers that were paying attention. And it was very specifically a constant issue where in between those statements, or the questions of each of the counsels, she would kind of try and mouth something. And I'm not a lip reader really, so I could barely understand what she was trying to say, but she was very specifically trying to communicate with him. And after doing that repeatedly, he he had told me that he had asked counsel to ask her to stop it, to bring it up to the court, to bring it to their attention, but they were kind of all playing that game of chess, and he finally got tired of or impatient with it and went, knock it off, right? Or stop doing this, like it was a gentle admonishment of a daughter that was misbehaving in a place where she was supposed to behave properly. And if there's anything that is ingrained in him, and I shamed him about this on the phone afterwards for being so stupid, but because the media took it and ran with it and spun it a totally different narrative.
Oh yeah, he's trying to silence her, telling her not to testify about this. That was the approach the media took.
Yeah, but
any father that was watching a daughter do that would be like, look, come on, don't.
I mean, during her testimony, if you watch the emotions on his face, like it was very clear what he was feeling. Love, pride, confusion, right? And then a little bit of outrage. I think especially when she started to really spin up, and even infer, the whole gun testimony should never have been in the trial whatsoever.
No.
I don't know why Schrader allowed them to even bring it up. It wasn't relevant to the case. There was never an implication that a firearm was used. My brother had a felony charge from when he was a teenager on his record. He could not own a gun, right? Period. It wasn't possible. He didn't have a gun in the house. He never wanted a gun. I had a hunting gun, a shotgun, a slug gun. And I stayed with him for a little bit, and he saw the gun, and he very specifically told me that it was not allowed to be on his property under any circumstances to get it out of his house. So the fact that it was even inferred just confused us. It was never an option in his life.
I was just that whole thing with putting her on the stand was so just at a cellular level distasteful to me. And I said, when we talked about that, Hayden and I talked about it, and the chat talked about it. At some point, she's going to have to deal with a lot of emotional baggage that's coming from that testimony at some point in her life. And I hope there's people there that will get her the help when she needs it, because she's going to need it clearly at some point. That you can't do that and not be affected by it as a child.
I mean,
with 12, 13, 14, 15, you don't appreciate it.
I mean, she's had 3 years of living in an echo chamber where Rebecca and Sadie have been able to continue to drive home one message. And how does that affect a child's perception of the events that played out? And I've never claimed that my brother is a perfect parent or a perfect person. He's done things that I personally wouldn't do to raise my children, because he had a different philosophy of parenting. He really believed in hands-on experience of the world. He believed that he should raise his children to test the world and make decisions or assertions on their own and develop their own views and independence that way. And I can't say that there's not logic, but that should be done within reason, in my opinion. But I believe that that's where he was coming from with a lot of these things that he was kind of accused of in this case.
Well, and I want to just shift gears just a tiny little bit here and get some of the super chats and questions that people have. And while we're doing that, there is a give, send, go for him, correct?
There is, yeah. We're raising money.
I can't find the link to that suddenly. If you can copy and paste that into the private chat, then I'll bring that up while we're doing this.
Oh, sure.
Flux, thank you so much for your super chat. Says, can we talk about the ball sackiness of the DA? He is a ball sack. Justice for Zach. We're here for you. That's kind of one of the things we can't talk about, is what a jerk he is. So let's not mention that, I guess.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's yeah.
I think that you could probably talk about the video evidence of him gesturing and mouthing along like that. That has all been recorded on the court.
Yeah, and like I always said, we had the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. This is the guy that trained the lawyer that none of us liked in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. So There you go. You know where Binger learned it during the Rittenhouse trial.
And the scary thing is, because I'm going through the Rittenhouse trial at the moment, I'm seeing the comparison, and I'm seeing so many similarities between him and Gravely that it's not funny. Now, I don't know specifically if he was trained, but what that tells me is that there is a very ingrained culture in that DA's office. And I won't go so far as to, engage in slander or anything like that, people, because you know that I try not to do that, dickhead. But, you just try and... It's just astounding. Now, and guys, so I've got the Q&A running in chat as well, and someone just said to me, I don't know whether or not you'd be able to answer this, Solomon, do you think that the judge would do a better job, or did you at the time think the judge would be doing a better job, or was it generally known that he was going to be letting in a load of BS?
I didn't know that he was going to be letting in a load of BS. Schrader had a reputation of being a bit closer to being a constitutionalist, to my understanding, going into the case, and I could be wrong about that, but to my understanding is that he really leaned into the letter of the law. But then, if you go back to the footage of the Rittenhouse case, to actually watching him execute the position during my brother's trial, it was like watching the footage of the Rittenhouse case, how quickly he was reading, verdict documents and everything else that he was doing. He was moving at like 3x speed. Like he was flying through the material. He was articulating. He was giving directions and organized thought. For this entire trial, it felt like he was really running at like 0.5. We got like half of Judge Schrader, and unfortunately, to us it appeared that his relationship with Gravely had kind of spilt into the courtroom in an ugly way. The way he let Gravely argue with him in the courtroom, the way he let Gravely convince him to make rulings on objections and things like that. It really disgusted us, as a family, because it was not impartial.
Yeah. But he has an interesting judicial style that I haven't really seen before. I mean, you have the people that will either do the sidebar at the bench, where they either put white noise in the courtroom so the jury can't hear, or they excuse the jury.
Yeah, he really doesn't like sidebars, from what I gather.
Yeah, but he'll do the talking objections, which, like I said, are ordinarily very brief, and then if it's something serious, he'll call him to the sidebar. But it's like he said at the beginning, because there's going to be an inevitable appeal or something like this going on, and I want to preserve, so when the appellate court sees it, they'll know exactly what I was thinking, exactly what I ruled, and why I did it. That's an interesting philosophy, but speed it up a little bit.
I think there's some argument there for the potential of this case translating into future legislation, right? That this case could then, what's the term when a case is
set a precedent.
Yeah. So when he can establish the grounds for the expanded interpretation of hearsay underneath law, which is effectively what happened in this case, then he has immortality as a judge, effectively, in the state, right? So then this case, breaking different boundaries in the Wisconsin law, it then becomes a precedential case moving forward for other cases to be tried. And I can't say specifically about whether or not he was thinking about that. Like, that was just my own opinion of the situation, but I believe that there was a very gray interpretation of a lot of law in this case, from my layman's understanding of the law, of hearsay, and of even the execution of search warrants, and how search warrants are given out or signed for a stalking accusation. So in this circumstance, it was just they really tried to stretch the letter of the law.
Yes.
Yeah, we had a couple more chats and questions here to get through. Just Cause. This happened before I got here, so I can't highlight it. It says, thank you for the Shackleton whiskey plug. It's kind of off topic, but you're welcome. Smoky with a nice aftertaste. And I've just closed the screen because that's how I roll. What happened? Okay, and then we have again I usually have like a dog cam here where we get a certain goal, but I took that off, and Marv White says those last chats better come off the doggo cam balance. I'm pretty sure I saw like 95 were the super chats before he closed that. Well, whatever, just it's tonight isn't the night to be doing that. It just went up there automatically, so I took it off. We're not doing dog cam tonight. That'll happen in a couple of days. Flux says, can we know we already read Fluxes? I think we're kind of caught. Yeah, we're caught up here now with the super chats and things. There were a couple of other points that people were making in chat. KT said, yeah, the alleged dead man knows the truth. And okay, keep that in mind, because that's kind of where I want to talk about next is the media and how this was portrayed in the media, and what I imagine are strong feelings about that. This trial shows the justice system is broken and unreparable here in the U.S. Yeah,
it's one off.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that soon here. And Dwayne Mann says, I don't do legal vices. Catch you later. Bye, Dwayne. Hope you come back again someday. Don't know what I did to offend your ear holes. Notes on a phone says, not going to lie, this case still hurts. The absolute corruption just blew me away. I don't know if it was corruption or, I didn't see any evidence of actual corruption. Just, you've got a lot of leeway as a judge, and I saw some shady. Well, corruption is a strong word.
There's a very delineating. There's a very big delineation between what is legally classed as corruption compared to the shady shit that lawyers can bend the truth to an absolute maximum sort of thing. So
unethical is kind of a better way of putting it.
I would say somewhere between unethical and corrupt was that my brother had motion for habeas corpus because Judge Schrader had sustained an injury, a fall injury, and you saw the big horseshoe scar. I think it was on the right side of his head. The big scar, and he was walking with a cane and stuff like that. So they had actually kicked the retrial, the hearings for the retrial out, and then it was an indefinite memorandum, indefinite hold on the case because Judge Schrader was hospitalized and in recovery, and so they tried to get a different judge to take on the case, but unfortunately, there was one other judge in the entire district court that could see the case, and that judge couldn't see it for like 2 years or something like that. And there was a major backup on being able to get his case tried. So they put in for habeas corpus. The chief justice had to recuse himself from making decisions in this case because he had a personal connection to the alleged victim, the Mr. Gutierrez, along with almost everyone else in the district court. So every other judge, including the chief justice, had some sort of personal connection to Mr. Gutierrez, and the chief justice still denied the motion to take this out of that district and to move it somewhere else, which is
inappropriate.
That's tremendously inappropriate, and that was something that we were completely flabbergasted by as a family.
Wow. For it to come to the point where Schroeder effectively has to come out of retirement to hear the case, I think it was absolutely inappropriate. That should have been removed. It's not necessarily forum nonconvenience or whatever the equivalent, but at the same time, there is some significant bias there, and that actually sort of explains a few little things there as well, because there were instances there where court staff were involving themselves in things where, we had a moment there where they had to take a sidebar because someone from the court staff had motioned something towards one of the bailiffs or something happened, and ordinarily you wouldn't necessarily see that. So to me, it feels like there was a little bit more interference, shall we say? But that makes so much more sense, really, when you think about how connected Gutierrez was to the court staff, basically. Yeah. So it's really surprising as well that they didn't. So I didn't know about Schroeder having the head injury. That adds a whole nother dimension to it for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was a head injury. He definitely had fallen and was walking with a cane. I don't know if he had broken a hip or what exactly. I don't know his medical history, and it would be illegal for me to look it up while I'm at work. But I, you know, I can't speak exactly to what happened, but he had sustained an injury and was in PT and could be there for it for quite some time. And during his recovery, then we had, Gravely, kind of whispering in his ear on what he wanted to happen. And Gravely, even in one of the hearings, said that he had a personal vested interest in making sure that my brother stayed in jail. And that, again, is a problem for us as a family. When was my brother ever going to see a fair trial?
He wasn't going to. That's the fact that those words even came out of his mouth is astounding, honestly.
Yeah.
And frankly, even after saying those words, and the defense made him, subpoenaed him as a witness in the case, that Schrader didn't kick him off the case.
I think he should have been. That was a brilliant move by the defense. I mean, just from a strategic point of view, putting him on the witness list because he did something completely ridiculous and made himself a witness in the case. It seemed like the rules of, the professional rules there in Wisconsin were pretty clear.
Yeah, they are very
Gravely
clear.
was pretty sure that they didn't apply to him.
Yeah, and it hasn't been done since I think 1978, to my recollection. So that a lawyer was allowed to prosecute and be a witness or be held accountable as a witness in the state of Wisconsin, and the state bar specifically has a standard of practice that if you were to insert yourself, that you must recuse yourself, or that you were obligated to, maybe not that you must, and that ethically is, outside of bounds.
The rules of professional conduct that they read in court seem to be pretty darn clear to me that he should have been gone. And on a lighter note, this was one thing that kind of, he sat there quietly during the entire trial until near the end when they asked him to speak about whether or not he was going to testify or not. And the females in the audience were all saying he has a great voice. The women all liked his voice. They're like, we had several people saying I didn't expect that voice to come out. He has that rich, deep baritone that, the girls seem to like here in the chat. That was a lighter note.
If it means anything, it's the first thing that Jen noticed about me. I surprised her by calling her our first conversation when she got off of work early in the morning one morning, and she was like, she had an moment.
And says, I was amazed that the mother of Zach's child was only with a missing man for 3 months, but she was acting like the relationship had gone on for years. That sticker that she has on the back of her car.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up because
fucking stupid. Anytime you feel the urge to get cursy, please feel free. This is a cursy channel. It's because that was just fucking stupid.
I want to point out that I believe that was bad information. I believe that sticker is on the back of Celia's vehicle, not Sadie's. So,
okay,
from my understanding, that's Rosalia's mother's vehicle, not Sadie's.
I hope so. That would totally change my opinion of a lot more
sense.
Yeah. I mean,
people were going on about how there's supposedly the evidence that points towards a stalking and that sort of thing, but seeing that and have someone point to that and saying that is Sadie's car, that has me thinking maybe it was going the other way. So that's
okay.
Yeah.
So if that was that was his mother, okay, that makes sense. I hope it was his mother.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense, but it still doesn't make sense, her narrative, and if you watch the case, there was, which you did because I was there watching you watch the case, but there was a point where she started to talk about stalking, and if you actually run the timeline, it's right around when Zach told her he was going to take her to family court. And then it was like this weird panic response that she and Rebecca had cooked up this idea that they were going to accuse him of stalking based on this idea that, or the statements from my niece about them going to the home on the night of the 24th, that was absolutely grounds for everything that was going to happen, and that they could pursue that as something to present in family court. And and you could see the narrative, like, think about how the morning or the day after Gutierrez stopped responding to her, the first thing that she and Rebecca talked about was whether or not Zach was connected to him not talking to him anymore. There was no logical connection or previous statements in that conversation that would have led to that statement, and it was odd.
There were so many odd things that I'm sure you can't get into that weren't addressed in trial, about the leads that weren't looked into.
Yes.
I still am not sure what clearly Facebook dating app is not the place to meet people. That's the takeaway I've got from this trial. But the court clerk, she was from she was from Milwaukee. Where was she?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
That was weird. You show up 40 minutes late, don't say anything to anybody. You show up for 40 minutes late, and then suddenly, I'm here, I'm worried about you, I'm praying for you. I'd be just thinking, son of a bitch ghosted me.
Right. Yeah, or he fell asleep.
Well, some people are just desperate. Let's face it.
Like, he had his kids all weekend, and he fell asleep, on the couch watching TV or whatever when I showed up at 9 p.m. Maybe he was just like gone, like, I can tell you that as a parent, I've done that. I've just fallen asleep accidentally.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah.
And there's a whole, pretty much everybody that I saw that was a witness for the prosecution could have been someone that justifiably could have been looked into and investigated.
Well, they have
money to people. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, look, in terms of, given that it's a reasonably small area, that sort of thing, the other thing is, with the things that could have been looked into, the additional leads, is there any sort of rumors going around? Was there anyone, was there any alternative theories put forward in the community that we didn't hear about in the trial?
Yes. We can talk about, yeah.
There were multiple things that had happened that they had referenced. Mr. Mercier, Nick Mercier, had posted on the Facebook public site that he knew who had done this, and that he had posted, some picture or some post, naming someone specifically, and then he magically refused to give any statement to at least my brother's lawyers after that. Would not talk about the case. He last I had heard, he was in custody again in KCDC. So the guy had kind of a criminal history and might have been connected with people that might have been connected to this case, and the police didn't bother, following up on that anonymous lead at all with a guy who had a criminal history. There was other things that they definitely didn't follow up on, and things that were brought to the attention of the court that then, the judge denied, specifically the Denny motion for Michael Campbell, where the defense actually brought motive, opportunity, like the three correlating factors for bringing a Denny motion to the court. And he said, I don't think it's strong enough. No. And that was kind of disheartening, because if they could bring the evidence that argued for it, why would you deny it if it's there? And I can't talk about the specifics of those things, but the Denny motion was, they talked about the denial of the Denny motion for Michael Campbell and some of the suspicious incidents that happened around the night of the 17th, and that was interesting, that was ruled in that way. And then the mischaracterization of the evidence, or not even evidence, because it was in the opening statements about the text messages between Rebecca Jekyll and Sadie that then stopped the trial for a day. And whether or not they had tried to build all three of those aspects of a Denny argument, and the fact that they took it seriously enough to pause the trial was baffling, because that was never implied.
Yeah, that was a tense moment there. That could very easily have gone to a mistrial, given the atmosphere and the way that Judge Schrader was looking at it. I was going to say I'm glad it didn't, but yeah, who knows?
It probably should have at this point, frankly.
There was 4 or 5 times there could have been a mistrial as this was going on. And
Yep.
I just want to take a quick little pause here and mention the Give, Send, Go campaign. Let's see here. Now, this is something, I'm not saying to do it. I'm not saying not to do it. I'm saying if anybody in chat is inclined to do this, let me put a link here. I'm going to put the link in chat. If any of you are inclined, if any of you want to contribute to the Give, Send, Go, please do so. If it's not your thing, and if you don't want to, please don't. It's entirely up to you. We're just putting it out there. It's the free Zachariah Anderson Give, Send, Go. It's embiggening it here. The goal is 54,000. We've got 4,280 right now. It says, we're the family of Zachariah Anderson. We're asking for your help to raise money for legal expenses. On March 22nd, 2023, Zachariah Anderson was wrongfully convicted on several charges in Kenosha, Wisconsin. He's currently facing a possible life sentence in prison. We won't go into all the details here as the trial was already highly publicized, and we hope that if you watched it, you came to the same conclusion. His guilty verdict was a miscarriage of justice. What we're arguing here is unprecedented. It isn't unprecedented or unique. This is a tragedy that happens far more frequently than anyone might suspect. According to the National Registry of Exonerations, the rate of wrongful convictions in the U.S. is estimated to be somewhere between 2 and 10%. With a prison population of about 2.3 million, there could be anywhere between 46,000 and 230,000 innocent people incarcerated. Proven innocent people have served more than 23,950 years in prison so far. According to wrongfully convicted statistics, official misconduct is the cause of wrongful convictions in 31% of murder exonerations. Source: Criminal Legal News. Wrongful convictions statistics show false accusations are present in 70% of wrongful convictions. False accusations, along with perjury, were present in 101 of the 143 exonerations in 2019. That's 70.6% of the cases involved lying. Media coverage of crime contributes to wrongful convictions in 2 capacities, and this is what I want to talk about here in a minute. First, prejudicial media narratives play on public emotions, putting pressure on police investigators to apprehend a suspect. This can lead to rushed investigations and tunnel vision. Sometimes the puzzle pieces don't fit, but if the investigators have been slanted toward a suspect, they force everything to fit to fulfill their duty to apprehend. Second, once a person has been charged with a crime, pre-trial publicity can lead to a trial by media. As jurors are selected from the local public that is exposed to these publications, pre-trial publicity can become a serious issue when the material issue is prejudicial. Ultimately, news media sensationalizes or dramatizes crimes to entertain their viewers. This negatively impacts the right to a fair trial. Zach unfortunately faced all of these setbacks. From the day of his arrest, local media coverage slanted the story with bias, only reporting information that lent itself to his guilt. Because Zach was implicated in the missing persons case immediately, there was never an unbiased police investigation or media reporting. He was connected as the face opposite the missing person since day one, and he was tried and convicted in the court of public opinion long before his jury trial. Zach is not a perfect man in any way. No one has ever or will ever claim this, but he is a good man that has been unjustifiably assailed by our justice system, as too many have. In the meantime, devastatingly, there is still another man missing that was robbed of his own resolution the moment Zach was falsely implicated. If an investigation and conviction still leaves more questions than answers, then justice has not been served. Our campaign funding will go towards legal expenses necessary to investigate the truth of the matter and find closure for all victims involved. We welcome and appreciate each and every donation, big or small. U.S. Supreme Court Justice... Well, hello, dogs. Justice Sonia Sotomayor said it best: justice is served when a guilty man is convicted and an innocent man is not. We have the address there. The link was sent into chat. And if you want to donate, please do. There was something very important in there, which I mentioned I wanted to talk about, this media thing. We got to have the hype. We got to have the headlines. We got to grab the attention. We have to do all of this. And I usually just kind of follow through with whatever the headline that the Court TV or Law and Crime does. And I did it for the first day of this trial. They tagged the video "Obsessed Boyfriend Murder Trial."
Mm-hmm.
And it was clear after day one that There may not have been an obsessed boyfriend. There may not even have been a murder. And I felt really bad that first day just copying and pasting that headline. So from there on out,
that's
I
why I felt
headlined
the
it
need to balance that
alleged.
out.
Yeah.
There you go.
I added the alleged obsessed boyfriend murder trial. It's all about the headlines. You've got to get that headline. You've got to have the talking heads that, you know, and I blame Nancy Grace for the vast majority of this that happened after the old lacrosse players from was it Duke? The Duke lacrosse players that she was all over. They're doing it. They did this horrible thing. They committed this thing with this woman. And it turns out it was completely false. But you got that. You got to get in there. You got to make it exciting, as you said there in the campaign. It doesn't sell. They don't get ratings unless they're hyping it up, unless they're pumping it up, unless they're getting people stirred up. And I hate that. How did you try to counteract this? I mean, I don't even know where you would start.
I mean, I reached out to a friend of mine who's a news anchor on the local CBS 58 News, and I said, can you try to run a counter narrative? And he said, I'd have to run it past the producers, but I don't think that it would be popular enough to run. You know, like their hands were tied completely. You know, from the first day, you know, they wrote all of this breakdown of things that they effectively accused my brother of doing in their verbiage and the implication in how they structured the article. And then at the very bottom of the article, they had like 2 sentences that said that he maintains his innocence and pleads not guilty. And it's baffling that we focus on a guilty narrative for clicks. The people that are writing these articles are doing it for the monetization of their own media, and the human fallout that it perpetrates is not considered. Nobody cares that they're destroying someone's, you know, reputation, their career, their family, because even after, you know, he's exonerated, even after all this happens, you know, he still gets to walk around with this tag on him, you know, where people might recognize him. How does he live in his community where he owns a house? How does he raise his children? How do his children look at him after this? And nobody cared, because the bottom line was that they needed to write something that people would click on.
Mm-hmm.
I think you said a mouthful there with it's not popular enough to hammer home the idea that someone is innocent unless they're proven guilty. And I just my entire life, I've just sort of said, okay, innocent until proven guilty, innocent until proven guilty, innocent until proven guilty. That's when now I like the phrase innocent unless proven guilty. But the one thing that I personally got out of this trial is insisting adamantly, not just saying it, not just giving a lip service, but insisting adamantly that we have a duty as American citizens to presume from the get-go that any defendant has been falsely accused of the crimes that they're accused with. The state has the power to literally kill you in states, and at least to kill your soul and make sure you never see the light of day again. That is a huge power, and they need to be held to that. We have to start from that presumption, not of innocence. That's just too easy to say. The presumption that they're wrongfully accused.
You know, Judge Schrader said something that kind of took me off guard. He said that the defense has the advantage in the courtroom, and that kind of made me like cock my head and wonder, you know, why does the defense have the defense or have the advantage? And it didn't make sense as the trial continued. Specifically because, you know, the way the rulings went, he gave every advantage to the prosecution, and
It did really feel like that.
It really was,
Yeah.
you know, including the other acts evidence, including all the other inferences that he let you know, Gravely include in the argument, things that were totally irrelevant to the case that he let Gravely make arguments about and ask questions and lead the witnesses about. And there was just a lot of things that didn't make sense to me. You know, it's true that if the population, if the regular American that is sitting on a jury truly believed and understood the lesson in civics that has to do with the presumption of innocence and the idea that the man or woman sitting on the defendant's chair is your best friend, is your brother, is your mother or father or whoever it might be, and you must prove to the juror that that person committed this crime. You know, that if we approached every case in our justice system with that mentality, that the person pretend like this defendant is your loved one, and we have to convince you that they're a rotten human being. If we started off at zero from there, our justice system would work very different. But I believe that, one, we haven't focused on our obligation in civics. We haven't focused on what it means in the justice system, how the justice system works, the consequences of finding someone guilty for something that they didn't do. You know, the reality of there being a $150,000 plus, you know, somewhere between 12 and 15 years in prison to see appeal based on you being kind of laissez-faire or not wanting to spend the time to really give the argument in the jury room the justice that it deserves, you know, because you're hungry for lunch or you're tired of being there for the trial or whatever it might be. And I'm not accusing these jurors of doing any of that, just to be clear, but if we have jurors in America that are unable to take and appreciate the gravity of the decision that they're about to make for a human being's life, then why are we doing it this way? What are we doing to make sure that our juries understand that those individuals are literally weighing a human's future in their hands, and that they have a responsibility, an ethical responsibility, to make sure that they are seeking truth and justice in their decision?
I can't say it any better than that.
I can soapbox for a little bit.
No, I mean you
Good.
can, and that's again one of the things that I want to talk about is how this has affected you and how this has changed your view of the criminal justice system in America.
I don't think that I took the justice system or the issues with the justice system seriously until I lived this with and through my brother. You know, the real responsibility, the connection to what really happens. I think that maybe you had posted something about the amount of money that the state can spend, an unlimited wallet.
Yes.
They can spend to try and convict somebody of a crime. But how much money does the average American have to try and defend themselves against that much power, that much weight and financial freedom? They don't. That's why poor people are so highly represented in prison populations. That's why it's one-sided.
I wish you were wrong.
Me too.
I wish you were wrong, but you're not. And that's the thing. And that's what I've always said about the O.J. Simpson trial. They spent $9 million prosecuting him. He was lucky enough to have the resources to spend about $6 million on his defense. They still outspent him by $3 million. He just had the ability to try to attempt to level the playing field. The average Joe does not get to level that playing field.
And it was still a 30%. They still spent 30% more. I was talking about this a little bit, like this. So they even made in their little gross victory lap, you know, press conference, which, I mean, if justice was done, victory lap, whatever, but justice wasn't done here. And it was very clear, especially by the look of shock on Gravely's face when they announced a guilty verdict for for murder because he knew that he didn't have a case, but he went for it anyway. But the reality is, that they had 15 law enforcement agencies, 15, thousands and thousands of man hours. They had ATVs, drones. They had, the dogs that were trained, all investigating all of these different scenes, right? So they investigated my brother's house. They investigated the tree farm, which was 84 acres that they had to completely map, drone, ATV drive, run with dogs, everything. They investigated the house and Harrington Beach Park. They had scuba teams out diving into quarries and trying to figure out if there was evidence there. And they continued to push that with no evidence other than the carpet missing in the back of the van, because they had no idea that there was a spot. They saw a brownish red, stain kind of in the vehicle, but they didn't know that was blood. And the luminol test came back very quickly, I'm sure, that it was negative. But they still spent all of that money. They still had the FBI put my eldest brother, on a lie detector and question him. So not only were we up against local law enforcement agencies trying to crucify Zach, but the FBI got involved. So, I mean,
wow.
How do you, as a citizen, stand there and try and defend yourself when you have everyone saying, well, let's try and prove that he was there with as weak of a case as they found and that you have seen, especially, and even the stuff that they haven't presented that continues to argue against. It is grossly unjust, and every American should be concerned, because this could be you. This could be your sibling. This is a problem.
What do you do when you get that phone call that your brother has just been arrested for murder? What the fuck goes through your mind?
Well, I was actually meeting with a client to go over a remodel at the time, so I was taking notes when my phone had rang, and I didn't answer the phone call because I was in a business meeting, and I walked out of the meeting and I called him back. He didn't answer. I called my other brother, and he said, "Well, I'm at the police station. I'm not sure what's going on," because they didn't tell us. They didn't tell us anything about it. They didn't even tell us that they'd implicated him in it until days after the arrest. And in fact, he told me that he had no idea that they had arrested him based on the suspicion of this missing man for a while afterwards, until they sat down with him in an interview and presented papers to him for why they had arrested him. And then he wasn't never told it. He read in the documentation that they had accused him of being implicated in this missing persons case. And at that moment he said, "Whoa, I didn't do this." And as a family member, I think I made a reference to this earlier. When I had heard that he was being implicated in this, I said, "What? There's no way." Immediately, the tribal instinct of a person is going to be like, well, he's a member of my family. There's, absolutely protect him. But then it was a serious rationale on am I looking at this objectively enough? And I don't think that everybody does that, but I really tried to back off of the case a little bit and to really think about it. Like I never wanted to be the person post conviction that was like, I never could have seen this. I never saw. He was just you know what I'm talking about, because those things happen. Like, and I never wanted to be that person. So I really wanted to think about it critically and break down the information that I had at my disposal on the feasibility of this crime and him committing it. And I could not find a situation that made sense, because it doesn't.
No. I want to bring in the third person in our streams. It's Chandler Remington. Hi, Chandler. Welcome.
Hey, Chandler.
Hello, everybody. Hey, Hayden. Hi, Solomon.
Hey.
It's lovely to meet you. Also, hi, Jeff.
My pleasure.
Sorry I'm late.
No worries. While you're here, we do have a couple more super chat questions and comments that were made here. Kyle Bogues had said it before, and I'll say it again. Anyone who believes juries don't do their own research are naive. I'd like to believe I wouldn't, but I doubt it. See, we have to give them the benefit of the doubt, unless we can actually prove that some juror didn't do their job. But it would be exceptionally hard to not hear anything, not say, especially if they're not sequestered and it goes on for much longer than you think. I think we need to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that they didn't, and just from a practical standpoint. The question that was asked, which came up just before we did the give, send, go, is he suffering in prison? Just jurors, thank you for that, just juror, by the way. Is he okay in there? Yeah, okay in quotes.
Well, technically, he's not in prison yet. He's still he's in jail. Jail is worse than prison. You don't get to see the light of day. You're stuck inside a box with no windows. You get nothing. You have your shower stall, a public shower stall, and if you're in group, you're in with a bunch of other people in lined bunk beds in one big room with cameras on you and guards watching you with a partial shade that doesn't necessarily cover your genitalia when you go to shower. So it's not a fun time in jail. You know, you either go and you're there, or you're in the hole, as they called it, which is solitary, which is this echo chamber, as they had described it in the courtroom, where spoken word travels and echoes in that room, and he doesn't sleep. And I think that he had referenced that he was awoken regularly by the guards, especially right before the closing statements, and that was one of the reasons why he was falling asleep in court, is that he hadn't slept for like multiple days, and that's why he was sitting there nodding off during Gravely's closing argument. But you're not necessarily treated fairly or well by correctional officers, in a jail or necessarily in a prison. They some of them have power complexes. Some of them, if they get in any kind of heat for anything that might have happened, in the jail by anyone that is at like some managerial warden position, then the COs take it out on the inmates that made them, get a write up or a talking to or whatever it might be. And I'm not, again, accusing any individual of doing any of those things or who it might have been, but it's an unfortunate reality that is not unique to my brother, right? Think of all the people that are stuck in this situation, that are presumed innocent, that are then treated this way in our jails, and prison is a little different. It's they get a wage in prison. It's not a good wage, but it is a wage.
And people are settled in for the long haul, and you kind of have to get used to it at that point.
Yeah.
We did have someone saying here, was your brother able to have private communications with his defense team during lockdowns, or was it through the prison surveilled phone lines?
Well, they just changed their communication system in the last couple of months, and since they completely revamped their phone and communication system, he hasn't been able to have a conversation with his lawyers over the phone that was private. So it's been kind of a problem, because then the information was never transferred over and uploaded into his account, and he could not make a phone call to his lawyers that didn't cost him money to start, and that was not being recorded by the jail.
Wow. Yeah. Shade Chaser says, if the feds get involved, then automatically assume false accusations for sure. You automatically have to assume for anybody that it's a false accusation. The state has to prove that it's not. They keep admitting to planting evidence and informants. Yeah, we saw some of that recently. And this is kind of, it says, thank you so much for that super chat, by the way. And Cosmic Surgeon, thank you so much for yours. Way off topic. I think I'd appreciate your commentary on Lori Vallow. I don't necessarily know your opinion on her faith, but I think you understand it better than most. Would you or could you recommend someone to watch? Danny on Direct is covering the Lori Vallow trial. She'll be attending it for at least a week. She's doing a stream on it every day. I'll be on there as much as I possibly can, but check out Danny on Direct for that. Feral housewife. Saul, tell Jeff why Zach originally grew his hair out. He got a lot of hate for the man bun.
You sure did. So I think it is an important thing to note. So when my niece was born, and she was a little girl or a baby, a toddler, she was afraid of getting a haircut. So he told her that he would not cut his hair until she went and got her hair cut. So for years, he grew his hair without cutting it, literally years. And so for a great portion of her childhood, he rocked a man bun and a ponytail, regularly. He had hair ties all over the place. And he very specifically went to her first haircut with her and got his haircut in the chair next to her.
Oh, that's nice.
It's a sweet story.
Now, Chandler, I don't know if you've been listening while you've been getting ready and whatnot,
Yes,
but is there anything that we haven't talked about that you have any questions, comments, or anything you want to bring up from what we've talked about so far?
At the moment, I have been thinking about questions, but I've just been really enjoying hearing what Solomon has to say. You're incredibly well spoken, and I really appreciate hearing all this perspective. I'm learning a lot of new information. And we were all very invested in the case. And I guess if I could ask you one question, I don't know, how are you doing now with all of this? That the dust has kind of settled a little bit?
I don't think it's settled for us. But I mean, emotionally, still a little raw. It's not an easy thing to deal with. I'm not sleeping a lot, so I'm in school, I'm working, I'm still a dad. I'm still a dad. We have a baby on the way. I'm busy with doctor's appointments with Jen, and we're doing this all while trying to run this awareness and social media campaign, and while trying to organize things for my brother's defense, trying to raise money to hire investigators to do what's best for Zach. And that means that I'm sleeping maybe like 3 to 5 hours a night, something like that. And it's been hard for all of us, I think.
I'm sure that it has.
Yeah, and it's gotta. I mean, I can't imagine what it would be personally, just knowing that people are going to move on, and this is just going to become a footnote for everybody else except for the family. And it's a struggle to keep it out there because people, all right, he's convicted, it's over. We don't need to pay any more attention to this. But this is kind of the beginning for you guys.
Yeah. I mean, like I think you had said that when the verdicts came out in your live stream, you said it was a very, very true and very empathetic comment that you made about how, for you guys, for the streamers, for the public that are casual viewers or that are invested in just the modern crime drama, you move on to the next case, you find something else to watch. This was a moment of time for you that was just a glimpse of your free time that some people made money on. Some people they just did it for their pleasure. But for our family, it's a nightmare that will continue to be lived for literal years and potentially decades. This was as unjust as our system could have operated, and I still struggle to really wrap my head around how a rational human being that understood the assumption of innocence or the presumption of innocence could humanly have sat through that case and then come out with a guilty verdict. I cannot wrap my head around.
Yeah, I've had people that have started watching this since the verdict came out, and they're asking me, say, well, what am I missing here? There's no murder weapon. There's no body. Gravely was talking about this sea of blood where literally every livable surface other than where this missing carpet was covered in blood. And Aussie and I and Chandler, we all just sort of agreed it looked like somebody slipped, hit their head on a coffee table, and then sat down on a couch for a bit, and that was kind of it.
Yeah, then got up, walked out the door, left a little bit of blood on the doorway, and they were never seen again. That's effectively what it came down to for me, anyway.
I mean, to be fair, there is droplet splatter in a lot of different locations. Like in the zoomed out photos, it probably would have behooved them to actually have used luminol on the apartment afterwards and taken those photos, but they never did that. Right? They never actually tested the shoe rack or the shoe tray that was moved. They never tested every single pattern of blood spray, as I understand, because there's like droplets, from gravity. There's spray from active swings. There's like pooling and oozing blood. So there's like different aspects of what might have occurred, and from each of those incidents on the crime scene. In digesting that, they didn't pull specimens from every single spot. And how do you test that? I don't understand how you can rationally say that you absolutely ruled out every possible perpetrator if you didn't test absolutely everything in the apartment. And I mean, furthermore, that the state's presumption of timeline was so messed up. On how they tried to assume that this murder happened, that this act had occurred. They even made the commentary earlier on that there was road construction and all these other issues. They also made the commentary that they didn't find any video evidence on any footage that they had located on traffic cams, on doorbell ringers, on anything that they canvassed in the neighborhood around Mr. Gutierrez or around my brother's house. My brother lives down the road from his school. He would have had to drive a really long way out of his way to get around a school to avoid those cameras, and the gas stations and everything else through downtown Milwaukee, where they have news cameras fixed on all the interchanges for morning rush hour, that they could have gotten all that footage. And I don't know that they got that footage. I didn't get the discovery personally, but the reality is that they would have had to have been able to see that. And if he had avoided those cameras, it would have taken him an hour extra, a half hour extra, depending on what route, maybe more, to make it from Mr. Gutierrez's home to his home, both there and back. Their timeline physically is impossible. It does not make sense.
Exactly. I feel that exculpatory evidence is some of the most important evidence in a trial. I think it's incredibly important to look at what are we not seeing. We're not seeing your brother's DNA anywhere on the crime scene. But we are seeing some DNA on what I believe was the credit card that did not match.
The phone.
So,
yeah.
The freezer. The phone in the freezer.
The phone in the freezer. Yeah, that was definitely handled by someone in the freezer. There was also taken into evidence on one of the screenshots that somebody took that was presented to the public. They pulled and tested a straight razor, or they had taken a straight razor and tested it. And I don't know if they sent it to the crime lab, but I believe they had, and that it ruled out everyone involved. It did not have Mr. Gutierrez. It did not have my brother's DNA. It had some other party's DNA on it, and there was this straight razor, and they never even presented that. Of course, the state wouldn't, because it would, I think you had played the GIF of Jim Carrey and Liar Liar, because it's devastating for my case, over and over again. And that's really what it felt like, is just this deception game by the prosecutor the whole time to not present the things that they had found that 100% exonerated my brother.
Well, I mean, there was a couple of things, and I'm just throwing these out for a comment that probably may not want to and may not be able to comment on. But I mean, one, the way he was describing, going back to the blood, the three of us, we were expecting to see like a Carrie prom scene or the Shining elevator scene, but we're like, all right, this is kind of underplayed. But then, to me, somebody with a cell phone and credit cards in the freezer is someone knowing there's someone coming and looking for money, and you can go, look, I got nothing in my wallet. That's what that says to me.
I mean, for the record, there was missing cash, so which they didn't really focus on in the case. So Mr. Gutierrez had withdrawn $700 and then $300 out of his bank account, his joint bank account with his mother. So it was like $1,000 that he had taken out of his bank account in like the previous 2 days to the alleged time that this crime occurred, and all of that money was gone, every dollar of it. So, you know, I know that he had sent a message to Sadie about buying baseball equipment or something like that and spent like $200 some or whatever it is. So the remaining hypothetically $600 went where? You know, and someone went through the wallet, right? So the wallet's laying on the couch, the credit cards and the phone are in the freezer. So, you know, why wasn't that focused on as an investigator? I'm befuddled why it wasn't dealt with.
I mean, are you able to say or do you speculate about who may have been involved? I don't think you're able to.
I don't think I can do. I mean, because
a lot of people in chat are asking, "What do you think it was? This person? Do you think it was that person?" And I don't think you're able to comment on any of that.
I think that there was some suspicious text messages that had been exchanged that were displayed to the public that should have raised the hair on the backs of the police officers' necks. Specifically, the exchanges between Sadie and Mr. Gutierrez, where he offered to go, potentially break my brother's leg, you know, and give him an old-fashioned beat down, and then the odd text message that they brought up between Sadie and Rebecca about how she wouldn't know when it would happen in a week. She wouldn't know who or how, and somehow, you know, the police saw this. It was in their evidence, and they were like, she's just an innocent lass. There's nothing to look at here, and just continued to lean into the idea that she's just this damsel in distress. How can you objectively look at the first person to show up to the crime scene as a police officer, the very first person that also has all of this suspicious content in their communications with other people, and not raise suspicion on them? And I'm not saying that she was involved in Mr. Gutierrez's disappearance, but I am saying that they probably, as investigators, should have made sure that they saw that as a potential lead in this case. And I mean, they probably would have ruled her out. I'm not saying that she committed this crime, but there's definitely things to have looked into.
Well, that's a problem with police investigations in America, by and large. They think they know who did it, and then rather than finding out or trying to exclude that person or trying to find someone else, like, okay, we think he did it, now let's build our case around this assumption that he did it.
Yeah, and let's exclude anything that points to somebody else.
I had a brief conversation with Kenneth Maines about this, and I don't know if you're familiar with who he is, but he's a fairly well-known detective that chases cold cases, and he specifically talks about really wanting to pursue the truth. His opinion cannot be bought with any amount of money. That when he investigates something, that he is very specifically seeking the truth in the evidence, and that is the level of integrity that all investigators are supposed to have in our nation. Every single detective that investigates a crime, especially of this gravity, should have that level of bias, that the truth is the only thing that matters in this, regardless. And I understand in the investigation of my brother. I totally understand why they would have looked at him as a potential suspect and then maybe gone down that rabbit hole a bit. But why would they close the door on so many other leads in the process? That was always the question in my mind.
Well, a prosecutor's job should be to pursue the truth, always.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's clear to us in this case, I think that's not what they pursued. They pursued your brother as a specific suspect, and I think they should have answered those questions. They should have ruled all those other people out. We are left with more questions than answers, like Jeff said, and that means that due process is not happening here.
Right.
And there's a couple of things I want to bring up here from the chats, and then I want to talk about what I consider to be the only two pieces of direct evidence against Zach in this case. Well, possibly direct evidence. Let's put it that way. Where do we go here? Do you want to get through some of these? Because I know it's past Hayden's bedtime by a couple of hours.
Thanks for hanging in there, Hayden. I appreciate you being here.
We've got Kimmy saying, speaking of the phone, how many people are actively using their phone while taking a nap? That would explain inactivity on a device. Exactly.
This guy does.
Yeah, I may or may not have blocked people in Hayden's stream while asleep. But hey, it's happening with Harper. Thank you so much for your super chat. Why does he think Sadie accused Zach for custody?
Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious. So there was a history of her attempting to accuse him of things. This isn't an isolated incident. There was an issue where I have to try and pick words. I don't want to accuse her or lay into light some of the ugliness that had transpired in high detail on the internet. But it is important to recognize that this behavior was not isolated, and that I had multiple conversations with Zach in the years prior to this event, cautioning him that it appeared that she was attempting to build some sort of case by using police against him in calling Crying Wolf. And this was a constant issue that they had been going back and forth with. And like I said, it was multiple years that this had gone on, and I had fought a custody battle, so I took that to heart, and I cautioned him about it very specifically because of that. So if you really want to know, I can't tell you the nitty gritty, and I think it would be unfair to his children to get into it, but there's history.
Yeah. Well, and Alice Elliott said, how can we send letters of encouragement to Zach or money on his books? Is there any place where you have this information set up where people can go and find it?
So we actually have a Facebook group set up, and we've outlined how to contact him through the GTL apps. We've outlined how to contact him by writing him mail. We'll update that when he's moved to a different facility because right now he's still in Kenosha, but that's only going to last so long. With the rules of writing mail, so you could write him from anywhere in the world with pen and paper, just the old-fashioned way. It's less expensive for you to write it that way. I want everybody to be aware that they actually charge him by the minute to use the tablet. So not only do they charge him per message, but they charge him per minute to read the messages that are written to him. So it's in his and everyone's best interest for the cost of this exchange of communication.
Hang on. I'm sorry. What they charge him to receive correspondence for use of a tablet?
Oh yeah. In all jails and prisons across America, it's private companies that handle all communications, and they charge just usurious rates.
Yeah.
We're talking up to some place up to like $7 a minute.
Yeah. I mean, right now for him to call me, it's about, give or take, about $7 per 5-minute phone call.
Bloody hell. Yeah, okay, write to him, people. Don't cost the man more money, okay? Write to him.
Write to him with pen and ink. So what is the what's the Facebook ID that people can go to?
I can dig that up real quick. We have a group that is Free Zachariah Anderson on Facebook. You can probably find it through hashtag Free Zachariah Anderson. If you can find that on Instagram, I believe that we have that as well. I'm going to put this in the private chat in StreamYard for you, so you can have that and post it if you'd like. That's the group, and people are welcome to join. We ask that everybody is respectful. Again, I made a PSA in that group that Sadie is the mother to my niece and my nephews. She is, regardless of this situation, still an extended member of our family. And that is I mean, frankly, shady as some of the conversations, some of the behavior is on the internet. We want to extend her the courtesy of respecting her as a person. I don't want people attacking her for what she did, what she said, what she testified to. You know, the internet is forever. Her children are going to grow up and see this, and it's important that we maintain respect in our discourse across the board.
That's an important thing to say.
And if you do have to vent your spleen, people, that's what the Discord's for.
Right.
And on the heels of that, Kime saying Sadie testifying that she couldn't get a hold of her friend Rosalio, and she instantly knew something was wrong, raised a giant red flag to me. Well, especially because the timeline puts he at least wasn't communicating for part of the time because he was trying to hook up with the chick from Milwaukee.
Yeah, let's not forget that she testified that she knew that he was missing on the 18th, a day before she drove down there, which is very confusing and alarming.
That she characterized him as missing, and that in her mind he was missing because she hadn't heard from him for 24 hours. When if she had known him for 6 years or something like that, if they had been dating for a very long time and it was not like him and she knew his character, maybe, but they didn't know each other for that long. And you know, as a woman, if I experienced that with somebody I was dating and somebody didn't reply to me for a certain amount of time, I would just think they're busy, they're screwing around with somebody else, it's none of my business. But I wouldn't think, oh, they're missing, I have to go and file a police report. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
And even after the fact, she had made statements about how they weren't exclusive and all that stuff. Like, you know, she had just tried to drop an emotional bomb on him that weekend, according to the evidence presented, where she was like, "I think I want you to be my person" for a while, and that is fine. She's absolutely justified in having that emotional experience. You know, that's not a big deal. But the like thumbs up fist bump that he gave her for that message, you know, should have been a red flag to a someone who's clear thinking that maybe he's not that into this. And then when he stops responding, you know, maybe he's just decided to duck out because you got too attached too quickly.
Yeah. I want to talk about the evidence here before Hayden leaves us. If you got a couple more minutes, Hayden.
Yeah, no, go for it.
The first main piece of direct evidence, quote unquote, which again, I welcome all. I don't necessarily like to do streams where everyone agrees with everything I say and I'm preaching to the choir. And I mean, clearly there are people out there that think he is guilty. And how he did it here says, it was Rosalio's blood. Guilty. Do not give this murderer money. Well, that's the thing. Let's look exactly what this juries fascinate me. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, just jurors. Let's look at this. That statement that it was Rosalio's blood. There was never any evidence introduced that was his blood. It was literally in the back of the van, a pinprick sized. It was so small they couldn't test it for blood.
Well, no, here's the thing, Jeff. It's something actually just occurred to me, and I mentioned it in chat, and I just realized exactly how tired I was watching this stream the first time around. The simple fact that they said that they could not ascertain that it was Rosalio's blood in the back of the van, by that same logic, because they couldn't build a full profile because his dad was missing, they can't actually prove that the blood that was in the lounge room was Rosalio's because they didn't have the blood profile.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what Solomon was talking about, where they didn't test everything. You know,
right.
But I mean, that's the thing is you can say it was his blood. That's what court TV puts out. That's what Law and Crime puts out. That's what the media puts out. That's what you would have you believe. But there was never any conclusive evidence it was even blood. Forget about whose blood it was.
Right.
It could have. It was a brown spot, a tiny brown pinprick spot in a van full of tiny brown spots that were all declared not blood.
Yes, that
So
was
the
my
same
understanding.
color. Yeah,
There were
the
other
same color,
spots.
smaller one. They couldn't even test it. And they did test because they couldn't test for both blood and DNA. So they tested for DNA. And the only thing they could say conclusively was it was a single source male donor, which just means that DNA came from a single male person. The part about it being Zachariah Anderson's DNA was pure opinion. It was the opinion of the lady conducting the analysis that said, in my professional opinion, it is to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty it was his.
Well,
That's
it was
a flag.
It was Rosalio Gutierrez.
Rosalia's blood.
Yes, that's what I meant. Yeah.
So yeah,
that's the flag. If you've seen any trials where they have really good, solid DNA evidence, they will throw numbers like this. This is a 1 in 3.5 trillion case that it's his, or it's a 1 in 53 billion possibility that it's anyone else's. They couldn't even say it's a 50% chance it's Rosalio's. They could just say we can't rule it out.
Like you said, the reasonable degree of scientific certainty. So with that, like, no statistics were ever cited. We also didn't ever see anyone talk about how DNA evidence can be transferred. We had Detective Lorne Anschutz that was at the crime scene in Kenosha. Then he drove all the way up to Zach's house that day to execute the other warrant and to arrest him. And we don't know that he didn't have DNA on him and then accidentally rubbed up against that part of the van when he was looking at the missing carpet. It was obvious to anyone that looked at the back of that van that it wasn't cleaned. And if there was a man that was bleeding as much as he was, right? Because we can say, like, it didn't look like that much, but it still looked like it was, up to 2 liters of blood that was missing. And I say that from my professional, observation, as I have watched someone bleed 2 liters of blood in an emergency room, right? So when you are looking at that much blood, there's no way that you're not getting any of that blood anywhere. And if he had to cut the carpet out of the back of the van, hypothetically, to remove some DNA evidence from there, how did it not get in any of the metal, any of the brackets? The luminol test was totally negative. If you saw the picture, if you remember, there's a picture of the back of the van, and you can see, like, the light on the hatch on the top, and then darkness. Absolutely no luminol positive, which is implicit of there being no DNA or bleach evidence in the back of that van that indicated that there was some anti-biological agent that was used to try and clean this up. There wasn't.
That's actually really interesting, because what the hell would that spot have been then? Because luminol, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but I'm pretty sure it's come up before, luminol reacts just to rust as well because of the iron content in rust.
It can.
So
yeah.
What the hell was that spot then?
I mean, likely because it was on the visor and at the front seat. I believe there was a spot on the steering wheel. There was a splash on the side door. It was likely like on the threshold by the driver's side sliding door. It was likely that had to do with some sort of paint stain or something that had dripped off the demo debris in the back of the van that could have been, frankly, sewage. That had nothing to do with what that was. He was demoing a bathroom and a kitchen, in this property. And when you tear out, rusty old, cast iron pipes, the slag that's inside of it is like a weird rusty brown color. So, I mean, yeah, right. And that may be too much information, but I worked in the industry. I know what it looks like, and it's very possible that it was that kind of material, and it would have splashed when you threw those pipes in the back. And if they had, galvanized piping or anything in that home, which it was in the era where galvanized piping was used during construction, it was highly possible that it was something like that. And I don't know that it would have tested positive for luminol guaranteed based on all the other gross stuff that might have been in there, but it could have also been paint or stain. It doesn't make sense. And the fact that they didn't find zero evidence of Rosalio Gutierrez's blood or DNA in any of the septic tank, the kitchen sink trap, the bathroom sink trap, the tub trap, right? If you consider the possibility that a violent personal crime, like brutally beating a man to death with a baseball bat and then cutting him or stabbing him or whatever they had presented in their fantasy of how this crime was committed, then he would have had blood all over him. It wouldn't have been something that you could just burn and walk away from. At some point, you're going to need to shower and wash what's left off. And that's going to end up in those different receptacles. You know,
Right.
I never saw that any evidence presented that they tested underneath his fingernails. You know, how many shortcomings do the police need to have for this investigation to be not complete enough to argue that they really even investigated my brother thoroughly enough to prove that he did or did not do this crime?
Well, see, that's thing to the commenter that said it was his blood needed to. Let's assume, just for argument's sake, that he did do it. Still, the fact that you are basing that entire verdict on a single tiny spot that we can't even say is blood, let alone whose blood it is, if it is blood, and you can't even conclusively say, even with a 50-50 chance, that it's the missing person's DNA. There is no way that should be enough to put someone away for life. No. And that is one of the things that's one of the mantras we have, that it's better that 100 guilty people go free than an innocent person go to jail or be convicted. So even if you want to believe he did it, there was how do you resolve the fact that there was no direct evidence? And I think we've conclusively shown how that is a false impression, that it was determined to be blood and that it was determined to be Gutierrez's blood. It wasn't. That is just a fact. You can't argue with that fact and say, well, yes, it was. Whether you think it was or whether you believe it might have been is not the issue. It could not be proven beyond any reasonable doubt whatsoever that that was blood, that it was his DNA. So again, regardless of whether he did it or not, that is not enough to convict someone.
Right. I mean, I would have understood if they had found some of Zach's DNA in Rosalio's home, right? If they had tested the hit Rosalio's home and the phone and all this stuff, I would absolutely be way more understanding and have a lot more doubts about the issue if they had tested, like they did, the phone and found alleles that matched my brother. But the fact of the matter is that people are picking and choosing what DNA evidence they want to believe. They're saying, well, the DNA alleles found on the phone that didn't match Zach at all, they were completely excluded, actually, that they were not a possibility, 0% probability that the DNA on the cell phone matched my brother. So they say that doesn't matter, but this pinhead-sized spot that was produced after some of the people that processed the crime scene went to my brother's home, and we have a text message string between Sadie and Mr. Gutierrez that talk about Mr. Gutierrez paying my brother a visit, that there are other confounding factors that don't make sense in convicting him based on this DNA evidence. It just doesn't add up. I'm sorry, that's not there.
I've been harping on that since the beginning. But like the lack of Zach's DNA anywhere on the crime scene. I'm sorry, it is very difficult to go into somebody's apartment, to brutally beat them, and to leave absolutely no trace that you were present. It's going to be very hard. It's not impossible, but that is very difficult for me to believe. And
I would like to. Sorry, Chandler, go ahead.
I just can't wrap my head around that, and I don't know how any jury could just completely ignore that.
I would really like to know the statistics on the crimes of passion where something like this had occurred. One, how often a crime of jealousy goes after the other lover and not the object of your love or lust, right? What correlation do they have?
It's very rare. It almost
extremely rare, especially considering the size difference. Mr. Gutierrez was a 6 foot, 270-pound man. Sadie is not that large. She's much shorter than me. She's 5'7", 5'8", maybe. And she's not that formidable, right? I mean, she's maybe for a woman tough, right? She plays fistball. She's not like a pushover completely. But the reality is that it's a lot easier to subdue a 5'8", 100-whatever-pound woman than it is to subdue a 6 foot, 270-pound man. And when you commit a crime of jealousy or a crime of passion, what are the rates of that being a perfectly spotless crime scene where the DNA of the perpetrator is not left? And furthermore, what are the rates of a crime of passion where a man is murdered out of jealousy or a woman is murdered out of jealousy, and then they remove the body to get rid of it when the job is done? I mean, wouldn't it have been easier, hypothetically, to have gotten like a gun if you really wanted to dispose of him and do this and just knock on the door and then bang and then leave? I don't understand why in this situation you would not consider that my brother, never having a relationship with this man, would ever have been in the apartment or like to start with, or have jump scared him like this to begin with, to then commit an act of very personal violence against him that ended in this. If it was supposed to be clean, then why go through all the trouble?
He never met him. He never spoke to him. Bludgeoning somebody is a very intimate, up close, personal kind of interaction.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do that to somebody who you've never sized up in person, who you've never met face to face. He doesn't know his strength. He doesn't know if he's going to come back at him. The guy plays baseball. Obviously, he has baseball bats in his house, so he doesn't know that he's going to come back with some object. I mean, it's extremely risky. And if there was supposedly a gun, why didn't he just bring that firearm and just take care of it that way? It doesn't make sense.
And again, I want to get onto the second piece of evidence real quick, but in the meantime, how he did it chimes in again and says, well, what does rarity matter? Rarity matters everything. It's not proof. That Zach was a cowardly bully to his baby mama. He's a waste of air. So let's assume again, he was a bully, or that does not equal murder. Just because you have a dysfunctional relationship with someone does not mean you murdered a third person. And so, see, you got to get out of the emotions and look at the evidence that's presented to the jurors. What you think about it, what you think may have happened, what you think, okay, he was a jerk, she was a jerk. That doesn't mean you're a murderer. And I was pretty open from about halfway through the trial, I would say. I was pretty sure that if they had, I wasn't pretty sure. I could see reasonably how they could come back with a finding of guilty on the stalking charges. I could say, okay, the way it was presented, it wouldn't be unheard of. It wouldn't be unreasonable if a jury determined that he had been stalking at least one.
I disagreed a little bit.
Yeah.
I felt like the evidence was weighing very heavily, Solomon, on your niece's testimony. And as much as I admire her chutzpah, and I think that she's very sassy, and I think that she's very smart, I felt like it was her testimony that was driving a lot of the stalking charge, based on that, we drove to the house and he told me not to go up to the window and to, to cover my mouth. I mean, that's a very imaginative child who's very good at storytelling. I'm sorry. But no, I mean, anyway, I didn't see the stalking charge personally. I didn't see.
Like I said, I personally don't think that there was enough evidence, but I could certainly understand how a jury could come to that conclusion. I wouldn't have been horrified if they had said that. But again, stalking doesn't mean you murdered somebody.
I do want to point out that that the testimony, she said that they parked in the bar parking lot, which is on the opposite side of the house as the living room and the living room windows. She then continued to testify that she watched him approach and put a phone in the window air conditioner unit, which is impossible. It's physically not possible because it was on the opposite side of the house.
Yeah.
So,
Nicole Muller brought that up, I believe. She said, "How did you know?" And she was like, "Well, I saw him, go around the house."
Right.
And was there a phone recovered from the air conditioning unit? Did they find a phone there?
No, there was never one there. And she never witnessed one there, and never testified to have witnessing one there. But she testified that she saw him put it in next to the air conditioner.
Which would have been impossible.
Which would have been impossible. Physically impossible. So he admitted in the police interview, I believe, that he brought her to the home. I don't know that that his logic behind that was sound, or that he made a good choice in that moment. But did he make an effort to terrify in that exchange? Was he concerned maybe about a person who was at the home and that might be around his children, and looked at the license plate and looked it up afterwards, which I believe was
I would.
testified to afterwards.
I
You
want
know?
if you're going for custody, I want to know who's hanging around my kids.
Yeah, and like I said, I can't excuse my brother's decisions in all aspects. I'm not him. I wasn't in his head making the decisions in the heat of the moment. Like I said, he did raise his children to to believe their own eyes, to really test things themselves. And I wasn't there to see the exchange between my niece and him and what led to that trip, that night before the birthday. But the reality is that she still testified to things that were not physically possible. It doesn't matter. They could not happen. She could not have seen him do this.
Well, I think we could see a lot of I'll say witness preparation from the prosecution side. A 12-year-old, she was 12 years old at the time, knew that he had exactly 72 marijuana plants, had a somehow growing in the hallway. There was a whole watering system. He had a drying room.
Didn't recognize it when you opened the bag.
Drying room. It was in the fridge, but then what is that in the bag? Yeah, that witness preparation. We'll call that one.
Oh, fuck no! I'll go the extra step. She was coached. She really was. Because I had this exact discussion and argument with somebody on Twitter about it, because there is a there is a distinct difference between coaching and preparation. Preparation is to get to the heart of the truth of a matter. Coaching is to guide as to what the truth should be. One of those is ethical, one of those is not.
And see, I don't want to cast any aspersions on the child as a witness. It's the people that are feeding her this information. An impressionable child that is being put up to this, that is being told, here, this is what you, and I can see it in my head. Not that I know this is what they said, but it was this way, right? It was that way, right? And so you can testify to that, right? They needed to get a story out, and they used an impressionable child to get this evidence in, quote unquote evidence,
which is reprehensible.
Very leading.
The same way. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Solomon.
I thought that it was really odd that that Gravely, on multiple occasions, when trying to present an argument that should have been excluded from the court, said to Judge Schrader, "I've got to get there somehow, Judge." And for me, that meant that he had discussed his plan or something with the judge beforehand, and was implying that he was he was trying to make this argument, and that the judge was supposed to let him get to that point in order to make some sort of assertion through all these leading commentaries and leading questions. And I say commentary because he answered for some of the witnesses that he had on the stand, and that blew me away. I couldn't believe that Schrader didn't do anything about it at all.
That kind of leads to that second piece of allegedly direct evidence that I was thinking about. The only other thing is Munch, our dear friend Munch.
Hang on, I thought you said we were going to talk about evidence.
Yeah,
that was the big piece of direct evidence. A confession. He confessed in prison to a guy who is facing 10 years to life. Somebody he's kept quiet for nearly 3 years, but he opens up to some random dude that's in his cell for a few minutes, and no, it doesn't even really open up to him in his sleep. Okay, you can be Gravely while we go through this, Ozzy. You get to be Gravely. And he was talking in his sleep, and then he looked at me and said, "Die, die, die, motherfucker." A guy talking in his sleep, and then he jumped down off and he looked me in the eye and he said, "I did it." What the fuck? Come on.
I want to know how the hell he didn't come up with a better story. I'm sorry. That was so, completely made up. To say that, he said that he was stabbed, when we already knew that there was blunt force trauma, supposedly. To know... I'm sitting here laughing.
Stabbing was never mentioned in the opening statements or anywhere up to that point. And then suddenly, the prosecution had to shift midstream and start saying, "Oh yeah, well he switched weapons," and
Yeah.
Munch. I mean, seriously, Munch is just where the jury should have gone. All right, we can go home now.
That was
Right.
one question. So during the trial, there was a point where, no, I think it was after the verdict was read, we were all really quiet and really devastated.
Yeah.
And I sent a message to the chat and I just said, if you could ask the jury one question, what would it be? My own personal question was, what did you think of Munch? Did that guy do it for you? Did he sell it? I mean, how? That's a like huge WTF moment where I'm looking at the jury and I'm going, how could you watch that and
take
still
it seriously?
convict this man.
Yeah.
How
He
does
was
that
nicknamed
not-
Houdini because he made bodies disappear.
And he was
So
Superman because he carried the body on his own. And
There's a couple of things about this issue. Is that
I'm sure there's a couple at least.
one that when he said that in the courtroom, I laughed. I literally laughed because it was so outrageous that it was
We did
comical. Secondly, that it was.
What was the reaction of the jury? Sorry to interrupt you. When you finish when you
finish
finish this, please talk about the jury. When you finish that story, I want to go ahead.
Sure.
Continue.
Sure. So that was, it was absolutely ridiculous. The whole premise of the story, and that the way he described it, that he said, "Look me in the eye and tell me that you did it," and then he jumped down from the bunk and he looked me right in the eyes and he said, "Yeah, I did it." Like, that whole thing is a fantasy. It's absolutely a fantasy. It's not true at all.
It is.
And
it was such a vivid picture. I was so convinced.
And then furthermore, I mean, in relation to his testimony, that there are actual statistical relevance of cases like this, where there was a very weak case against a defendant, where the prosecution actually fished inside the jail for jailhouse confessions, where there is statistical relevance on I believe the Exoneration Project and the Innocence Project, about how many people give false testimony in these situations, and the likelihood of it being a wrongful conviction in conjunction with this false testimony, even though a juror might not believe what this jailhouse snitch says, not completely. It still is ringing the bell in the courtroom and painting some fantasy picture about what might have happened.
See, that's just it, though. It all comes back to what might have happened. And
Right.
look, guys, I'm going to give myself a wrap up here because it's
Alrighty.
like it's almost 1:30 in the morning, and I'm going to be back at 5 to. And for everyone that's watching the Rittenhouse stuff, I've pushed it back a further hour because I'm going to need extra sleep. But okay, here's the thing: Gravely's closing statements. Maybe this happened. Maybe it happened that way. This might have happened. I'm sorry, by the very definition, by his own words, that's reasonable doubt. The jury should have acquitted then and there. That's the long and the short of it.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, literally, that's maybe is, as I said during all of this, when you say maybe, you are also saying maybe not.
exactly.
Yep, I couldn't agree
Rip
more.
yourself out of here, Ozzy.
That was
Yep.
what I said. So thank you, Ozzy. Thank you for your time this morning. I appreciate you staying up late, well past your bedtime.
All good. And guys, as I said, I'll be back at it's 5 a.m. my time. Hang on, let me just double check what time it's supposed to be. Gotta do the time zone calculator because I moved the damn thing. This is doing my best not to bring an absolute train wreck to the train halt to this, I should say. What is it? EDT at 5 a.m. 3 p.m. Eastern, I shall be back doing the Rittenhouse retrial. And guys, across the channels, there's about 1,200 people watching. If you haven't already, hit the like and subscribe buttons, both for me, because apparently I've lost like 10 subs in the last few days. But also, if you're not already watching Vices, I don't know why, because let's face it, it doesn't bring content. As always, guys, remember, you are not a piece of shit. You do contribute to society, even if all you do is hit that like button for us. And I am out of here, and I will see you later. Cheers, guys.
Bye, Hayden. See you later.
All right. Thank you so much. Again, anyway, get over there, subscribe to Hayden. Yes, we had Munch. I mean, come on. What was the jurors' reaction to? Because I, honest to God, would not have been able to keep a straight. I couldn't keep a straight face here, and I know there was no way I would have been able to keep a straight face in the courtroom.
I mean,
Did you see them react?
There was definite sniggers in the courtroom. I think that Jen and I were walking into the courthouse when he made the, when they had reacted and post the die, because we live like 2 hours away, so we were driving in, and that's why I could laugh audibly. If I had laughed in the courtroom, Schrader probably would have thrown me out. But we walked in, and you could see the look on the jury's face after the die commentary, that most of them had just written him off. I couldn't believe that had any bearing on the case whatsoever. And like I said, I was incredibly shocked and dismayed to hear 4 counts of guilty, and I could not figure out. I still cannot wrap my head around it. It didn't make sense. I mean, I watched one juror fall asleep during the case, so like sitting there.
Oh, that's not good.
The judge was asleep on the bench.
Yeah.
Like how is this not a problem? Like, he was all on video. Like, I don't know.
How can you fall asleep with Gravely screaming at everybody for no reason? He's a loud man.
You're great. I mean, to be fair, Gravely wasn't talking all the time, and right around 3:30, I think Schrader was getting his nap time, the circadian rhythm dip. And I was watching him kind of do these things sitting on the bench, and then kind of startle and then look at the clock and think about how much more time he had left to sit up there. So, man.
We've got a couple of other comments here that we have lined up that I want to get. That Munch thing just upsets me. Chris Mullen, thank you so much for being a new member. Deeply appreciated. Wolfram says she made the remark that he was missing 12 hours after his last text and waited another 24 hours before going to check on him. True statement.
Yeah.
Little chin scratcher there.
I mean, I know that you can call the police and say, I'm concerned about this person. Can you do a welfare check?
Well, yeah.
You don't have to literally leave your children at home and then drive an hour to go knock on a guy's door in order to figure that out. Why would you do that? Why would you be the person that needed to go make that trip? Realistically, it doesn't make sense. And
where do we go here? Tara Rayner, thank you so much for your super chat. How the F does Zach get a 270+ pound man out unseen, no noise, not a single person saw him there? His lawyers needed to get dirty like the DA. Oh, and also with a bad back.
Yeah, let's not forget the fact that he had a years-long back injury that, when aggravated, he would literally lay in bed for days. So on days that he did heavy lifting, like just in the history, consider that I did remodeling. And when he showed up to help on a remodel job and we were carrying heavy stuff out of a house, he would literally have to lay in bed for days afterwards because his back would go into spasms. He couldn't breathe properly and he was miserable. And the fact that they presumed that he had committed this crime, you saw the video footage of him walking around Walmart the next morning. He was relaxed. He was casual. He was buying regular groceries and then also, garbage bags and wipes, and he had a demo project, which you can use garbage bags for. I'm
not a choppy up kind of guy, but if I was going to chop up a body, I wouldn't just use a 13-gallon small kitchen garbage bag to do it. And I'm sorry, wet wipes aren't going to help.
No, they're not. And they made the assertion that they were bleach wipes specifically, but he had definitely bought at least one, if not both of them, that had no bleach in them whatsoever. They were just cleansing wipes. They're disinfectant wipes, and not necessarily.
They're probably Clorox brand or something, right. Not Clorox bleach. And even if they were, you can't wipe up a murder scene with a couple of and everybody. See, this is the thing that people don't consider. Everybody on planet Earth was calling to see what time Walmart opens, and they were buying disinfectant wipes.
I think you make a very good point about the back pain. Also, I have personally, I have chronic pain issues, and what you're saying is absolutely correct. If I'm, killing somebody and dragging their body out, and they're really, really heavy, I'm not going to go to my accountant the next day and do my taxes and drive to a whole other county. I'd be laying in bed. I wouldn't be able to drive. It would be too painful to drive. It would be exhausting. That makes perfect sense. I mean, you don't murder somebody and then